Well, Coach, thank you for joining me today.
Mike, I've been looking forward to it. I mean, your episodes have been stimulating, scary. You know, I'm not a big horror film I don't like watching Halloween movies or danger movies, but sometimes I feel like I'm in the battle with some of your guests, and it's been uplifting. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, you stole my question. I was going to ask you how I'm doing, but no, it's great to hear that. Great to hear that we're hitting on point on some subjects. But more importantly, what can we be doing better? What can we be doing differently? And I ask that because you're our first non-military guest on here.
Well, my theme right now in the COVID years of the last 2 to 3, 4 years, my theme in life has been shut up, listen more, learn, be curious and understanding, and then change. Because I think change is difficult for people. And I think change is, right now our country is as divided and conflictive than I've ever seen it. And I think we're losing our common sense. We're losing our common good. We're losing our common goals. And the more we can open and unify is the power that I want our broadcast to be. And I think you unify by telling stories and telling about experiences that are powerful, that at times can make you cry, and then at times can make you smile and be happy for days. And I think you're doing that in a very, for the word I'm going to use might not fit, but in a dangerous battlefield of emotions and war and the status of the military, of what we want to be, and you're a Navy SEAL and you're a dynamite. You're 1% of 1%. I mean, what you bring to the ability to lift and lead men in battle. It's a magnificent talent that very few people have the ability to do, in my opinion.
You know, I would say I'm just starting the path of enlightenment. If you looked at 20 to 30-year-old Mike between those age ranges, I did not listen all that well. And I think the older I get, the better I become at listening. I've become more empathetic, and maybe that is a result of the experiences I went through on the battlefield. But I will say this, as I get older, I realize how little I actually know.
So true. And the same thing for me. When I was a young coach, I didn't listen very well. I had a good career, had some good players. I learned a lot. I had great mentorship. And then I came down with cancer. And cancer has probably woke me up the most. That I was living my life differently than I should have been living it. I was giving my energy and my time to my goal in life rather to my friends and my family and the people that really care and love about me. And I learned the same thing. When I was 35 years old, I thought I knew everything. And when I was 55 years old, I knew I didn't know that much, except, the ability to lead a bunch of basketball players on the basketball court. I've always had the passion and drive to do it the right way. I think my foundation of North Carolina basketball, of a we and the team being the most important thing, possesses me. I don't like watching any sport that's a team sport where the individual gets the love and not the team. Because I believe in so much that championship teams are totally built on connection, trust, belief, communication, simple, common sense, human performance things magnified on steroids in many, many ways.
Coach, I couldn't agree with you more. So, you did praise me for being special operations, and that's great. And I'm wildly proud of that. But I think people have sensationalized special operations so much that they've lost fact that if you inserted only special operations into Afghanistan, much like we did in the early days, without the rest of the conventional military, we would have been wiped out. No airplanes overhead, no infantry to bail us out. We would be wiped out. Right. The reason we were so wildly successful is because of the Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Navy. I can't count how many times we had to call the Army infantry or the Marine infantry to come bail us out of a bad situation. But, it's special operations is sexy. It's the high-scoring member on a team, and I think people over-sensationalize that. Coach, I call these checking in with Coach because I highly respect you for what you've become, and I want to get to leadership. But you just talked about cancer. We get complacent in the very comfortable environment we live in here in the United States, and it is comfortable. You said you had to reflect differently when you had cancer. Right. It was a stark reality. And again, we don't really truly learn unless we're in tragic or dire times. That's where adversity and character is forged. What was it about cancer that made you start to reflect on your life?
Well, it was my second cancer. Prostate cancer is, it's dangerous. It still kills many people, but it's usually because it gets into a later stage that if we find prostate cancer, it's a livable one. The head and neck cancer I had in 2010, I lost 60 pounds. I was feeding myself with a tube in my stomach. I couldn't swallow very well. My throat was radiated to a lot of burns. I had a rash from the chemotherapy that I was taking. I didn't feel like I was human. I mean, I went through, I started treatment in about mid-February and it ended about mid-April. But by still the middle of July, I was still feeding myself through a tube in my stomach. And I was not very confident. I was scared to death. And I had to make a decision. Am I going to go back to coaching? Which I always thought I would. But when I was presented that moment in mid-July, I knew I had a lot of work to do. And the whole thing was probably I was scared. I lacked confidence in my physical abilities. I knew I had to change. I knew I had to change how I led my coaching staff and basically my team and maybe my organization in ways. And then in the middle of all of this is when Carmelo Anthony decided he wanted to be traded. And so kind of a bomb went off in the organization, and we're about a month away starting practice and trying to repeat to getting back to the conference championships. And that what I learned in those couple months was delegating. Instead of being a dictator, delegating is something I wish that I would have learned 25 years before. Because I was a dominant coach. I had great assistant coaches. I've always believed in hiring the best people, not my friends. I hire the most talented people I can find. And at times, people that I'm not sure think like I think. I like going outside the box in a standpoint for stimulation and innovation and creativity. But I knew I had to change my behavior of how I coached. And that's it worked, We went through a tough year with Melo, but we survived it, made the playoffs. Actually, I thought I played better basketball after Carmelo left. And then the next year was probably the most fun I had in coaching because I was delegating. And I was finding more joy in delegation than being the dictator of my basketball team. So, it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about, listening. Instead of being always wanting to be the voice, sharing the voice can show your appreciation for the people that are working their asses off for you. And showing appreciation is something, again, I think when you go through cancer and you learn a little bit more about a mindful presentation, about a life of giving appreciation, and also knowing the gratitude of what you have is probably the biggest key to your confidence. Being thankful has a way of empowering really intelligent people.
I like to believe everyone listening to this podcast is a leader in some way. You're either physically leading an organization, a team, a business, but even if you're a parent, you're leading your family. Everyone is a leader in some way. You as a leader, you have secured your legacy well into the future for decades and decades to come. I mean, you will be written down in history as the sixth winningest coach in the NBA. Now, I know that career is over, and that, we always wish we could go back.
Right.
You did a lot of things right. And I'm sure you've reflected and found that you could have done some things, let's say, better, differently. And it's okay, again, a lot of people don't want to be prideful about the things they did well. What were the things you would do that you think you did well, that our listeners are listening right now, they're leading organizations? What were those fundamental basics for you of leadership that you executed well?
I think the thing that I had the ability to do was on a daily basis, I have passion for the game of basketball. That might, as I get older, I look at myself, wow. If you would have been able to give that passion at different areas, you might have served mankind a little bit better in the other ways. But I just enjoy the gym. I enjoy the game of basketball. I enjoy the fundamentals of basketball. I enjoy the basics of basketball. I enjoy the camaraderie of basketball. The only thing about basketball that I probably don't enjoy is the media. The dealing with the media afterwards. And I believe in basketball, you lose a lot of games. In the NBA, if you win 50, you lose 30. There's a lot of days where you got to grow from mistakes and failure. And for me, over my years, that I think I did was my passion and my positivity. I always believed I could get it done. I always thought, no matter how good the Lakers were, or how good the Celtics were, or how good Michael Jordan was, yeah, we got to play closer to a perfect game than they can. But we have the ability to do that if we focus and are demanding of each other. So I think my positivity, my passion, I wish I would have understood how bad my ego was early in my career. I got in the way early in my career more often than I should have. As later in my life, I learned how to get out of the way and allow the players to have their talent be magnified by the team and by trusting in each other. I'm a student of the game. I've always been a student of learning and stealing. In coaching, it's usually stealing something from somebody else and making it a little bit yours. But I don't think I've had many of my own ideas. It's the game of basketball has been around a long time, and it's how you make it your personality, how you make it your direction. And I think so much of it is I've been blessed. The best decision of my life is I went to North Carolina and be mentored by Dean Smith. He's not only a great basketball coach, he's a great teacher of being a man. And if I had to say the one words that came out of Coach Smith's mouth, do the right thing. Is that great coaching? But, he trusted that the players he had knew the right way. And it was when we strayed from the right way. And, in today's world, we make basketball this complicated, sophisticated, intricate game. And it can be that. But in really, when it's played well, it's usually played pretty simple. It's pretty basic. You find the open man. You play defense. You got to have fundamentals that you got to stand by, and you can't can't cheat. And in the NBA, you got to have good players. You have to have talent. But there are a lot of teams in the NBA have a lot of talent that are not magnified by the team of connection, the team of trusting each other, the belief in each other. And so many players today are now individualist rather than we players. And I think the game of basketball right now needs to find more we, and not a lot. We have at times way too much me.
There is nothing like watching a team that's not the most talented, but works together and overcomes a more talented team.
Yeah.
If there was ever a team that you watched that was not the most talented, but just achieved teamwork on a level like no other, what team do you think that would be?
I mean, I think there are a lot of examples of it. The one comes to mind is I don't think the Chicago Bulls were the most talented team in the NBA. They were the most committed team. They were the best defensive team. And they had in my opinion, the best player ever to play the game in Michael. But Scottie Pippen fit Michael Jordan. And Phil Jackson, on an amazing way, found Dennis Rodman, who probably no one thought would fit Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, but they did. And so the years of Rodman and Jordan and Pippen, I thought the last couple years of them playing together, we played them in the 96 finals in Seattle when I was in Seattle. And, we could stop them, but they could stop us better than we could stop them. It was such a defensive battle. In today's game, I don't ever see that type of game anymore because we're not allowed to touch the ball handler out front. But I went back during COVID and looked at all 6 games that we played against Chicago, and it was not pretty basketball. It was probably more like ugly basketball, but with passion, with physicality, with mental toughness, and a lot of. You can learn from those games, even though today's game is much more free-flowing. But the one thing you said that I think is really powerful in my thoughts, and I think in your thoughts, is that the best does not always win. In fact, in the NBA, the best fail more often than they win. The most talented team, it wins the championship once in a while. But I bet you it loses the championship more often than it wins the championship.
It's when you can get a team that can be the sum of all its parts that things become powerful. You said a few things there, but before we go back, when you played the Bulls during those years, walk me through the feelings prior to those games. I mean, is that anxiety when you go in? I mean, knowing you're going against some of the best competition out there. What was your thought process and what was your mindset?
Well, the mindset was you just get done on a Sunday afternoon winning Game 7 against the Utah Jazz and Karl Malone and John Stockton, who are very physical players in a very physical series, in a very even series. And then 5 days later, you got to go to Chicago and play maybe what some people consider the best team of all time, and Michael Jordan. I mean, the preparation was fun. It was energizing. But what I was amazed about it, no one talks about this in the NBA Finals, is how tired you are. And then you are preparing for the biggest match, the biggest competition of your life. When you're basically running on maybe a 30% battery. You're worn out by the 4th playoff series in an NBA Finals. But you always find a way. And that was what's amazing to me is how tired you were in the preparation and how you're just searching for sleep or a pattern of rest. And you can't find it. You got tickets, you got family traveling, everybody wants to see you. You got 100 interviews. Your time management is a big part of being successful in the playoffs. And I think guys today are better at it than we were in the 90s. But the whole thing comes down to is the energy of that moment. What I remember is how focused you are. I mean, going back and recalling and watching it on video, I can remember, we talked about that in this meeting. And, you know, there's injuries, there's fatigue. We got down 3-0, and everybody thought we were going to lose the fourth game, and we won the next two and was scaring Chicago into game 6. And I think, you know, if we would have gotten game 6, we could have gotten game 7. But the momentum of a 7-game series is always psychologically interesting. They got up 3-0 instead of 2-0. We beat them by a close game in game 4, blew them out in game 5, and went back to Chicago and lost a really ugly game, like 85-78. I mean, now in the NBA, they score 85 points in a half. We scored 78 in a game.
So it was just that physical of a game.
It's a physical game, but I don't think how the NBA, the fans sometimes don't understand how, as you go further on to winning a championship, the mental part of the game becomes more important than the physical part. In Chicago, I mean, Michael Jordan is one of the greatest players, talent-wise, ever to play the game. But I don't know of a player that is as mentally tough in anything he does. If he's challenged to be the best, I don't think anyone is more focused and more directly in tuned to take you on than Michael Jordan. I've played him on the golf course. I've played him in ping pong. You know, I've played him in poker games. And he doesn't want to beat you. He wants to intimidate you. He wants to dominate your mind. He wants to make you go home and sit, and instead of going to sleep, keep you up thinking about, what the hell could I have done better? I mean, I had no chance at that. And I mean, I'm not sure that's the way we're supposed to live our life, but you know, Michael found his passion. He found the game that he could play, and he's in my mind the greatest competitor ever that I've ever met.
Was he a class act? Respectful?
Yeah. Michael in the North Carolina family, every time I've been around him, you know, he's very respectful to the Tar Heel Nation. He's very respectful to loving the University of North Carolina and being respectful to Dean Smith and Roy Williams and Bill Guthridge and the legacy that they've given all of us in a lot of different ways. I think Michael now, today, from my feeling on Michael, is, you know, he's bothered by all the attention he gets. You know, I think Michael just wants to be a normal guy at the club, at the country club that's going to go out and play a $25 in Nassau and compete, come back and have some beers, some drinks, some wine, and celebrate friendship and loyalty. And I think Michael just, you know, being a celebrity sometimes, you know, I came from a low middle class family. Michael probably came from an educated family. But, I mean, we come from middle class to now being at the top of the mountain financially and popularity in our society. And sometimes we just want to be the normal guy on the block. I know I do.
I think you guys have deserved that. And once you've experienced that for 20, 30, 40 years, it's time to have your own private life. You know, there is not, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with this, there is nothing like meeting somebody who's at the top of their game across the world, and they are the most kind, empathetic, respectful person. When I meet people like that, to me, they're Superman or Superwoman. They walk on water. Because I have met some people that are arguably very good at the top of what they do and are arrogant and disrespectful, and nothing is more of a turnoff.
I wish you would say that on every show you do. I I mean, the one thing about Coach Smith is he taught you to be a man and a respectful man and a caring man and a giving man. I remember every time I would go back to my hometown for Thanksgiving or Christmas or summer, he would say, George, I want you to go talk to at least 2 people that have helped you become who you are. And he always wanted Carolina guys to give back to their city or to their school or to their neighborhood in some way. And I think as we get older, I mean, we all want the big moment. But I think we all realize the little things of life is what really brings joy, and the soulful stories of life is what our foundation should be made of, and not winning a basketball game or winning a championship. One of my failures is I've never won the championship. And there are days that depresses me. And there are days that, it disillusions me. Like, my son got a ring with the LA Lakers. And he brought it to the summer. We have a summer get-together. And he's wearing this damn ring right in front of me, showing it off. And I'm just going, I've never, he has something I never have and maybe never will have. And then my 17-year-old daughter wins the state championship in soccer. And I never won a state championship either. I got to the state championship. I've gotten to the NBA finals. I've gotten to the CBA finals. I've gotten to the European League finals. But I've lost all those games. And so when that happens, I forget the coach of the Buffalo Bills, but a little bit, I think it's Chuck. No, it's, I don't know. But, he went to 4 Super Bowls in a row and lost all 4. And he now is considered somewhat of a loser. Yeah, Marv Levy. And I don't quite understand that, but that's the world we live in.
That brings up a great point. I want to ask you, is winning the ultimate determinant of what makes a great leader or a great coach in any profession?
I don't think so. I think there's got to be more intrinsic mentality to the success of winning. I mean, John Wooden talks about it, Coach Smith talked about it, that the scoreboard shouldn't matter as much as we make it to matter. And because of winning now is so publicized and so dynamically on ESPN, and I mean, we now have it at such a high standard that good coaches who win a lot of basketball, like my last year I won 57 games and got fired. And won Coach of the Year and got fired because of somebody's interpretation of what winning should be. To me, excellence, as a coach, I think I go into practices and I go into weekly, developmental mentality of getting better. And excellence, I think, is more valuable than people think it is. If you have a process that develops excellence, connection, and betterment on a weekly or a daily basis, you're probably going to be a damn good basketball team. And I'll say that I think most of my NBA basketball teams overachieved. And I think I never took an NBA team that was not a losing basketball team. Every team I ever coached, the year before I got there, they had a losing record or had a losing record when they came on board. And the next year, in every one of those scenarios except Sacramento, my last crazy trip, we got to the playoffs in my first year. And so we developed quickly. We got a culture of getting better. And betterment is so important in the NBA. Like right now, everybody thinks they can predict who's going to win the NFL championship. It's too early. I mean, there are so many things that even the good teams or even the great teams still got to do to survive the season. And teams that don't have the culture of excellence and betterment, I think are living they're rolling the dice of luck. It might work, but probably the foundation of fundamentals of excellence and betterment is so much a big part of athletics today.
I always like to say that my definition of excellence is a life of continual improvement. If you can do that for a sustained part of your life, then you've achieved the bar of excellence.
I like continual improvement is a good word. Another word I throw in here is the curiosity of how to be the best. Every person has a different path on getting their betterment. Everybody, as a coach, we always talk about ego management and attitude adjustment on a daily basis of who needs to be hugged and who needs to be kicked in the butt, who needs to be taken into the film room, what two guys need to go to lunch together. Because there's all this there's 15 guys in our basketball team that 10 of those guys are feeling whatever you're feeling. If we're on a winning streak, they're feeling happy. That sometimes sounds like it should be good, but happy is not always good. Arrogance is probably more difficult to overcome than a 5-game losing streak. When you're losing, I think players today want to get better. They want to learn. As where when you're winning, sometimes players don't think they have to do anything except show up. And that's the fallacy of a lot of betterment, the culture of doing it the right way, the culture of habits that sustain over 100 games in an NBA season. And you have a lot of things. You need talent. You need leadership. You need camaraderie. You need some guys that know how to connect with each other. Because as we talk a lot about team, is the power of 5 guys playing together versus 5 guys that don't play together is so obvious out there. And it's very easy to know in basketball what teams are together and what teams are going the wrong way.
So you keep bringing up Dean Smith. Is it safe to say he was your greatest mentor?
No question.
What was it about Dean?
He cared about you. I think more than anything else, I would say of all the players he coached, I would say 50% of them look at he as their second father. And your first father you get tired of. You want to leave the house when you're 17, 18 years old. You want to get away from your mom and dad. And Coach Smith gets you in probably a good moment. But, North Carolina, going to North Carolina, not only did I get a great education, I got a training in my career of basketball, but I learned about how, a mentor I wanted to be like, people always say to me, what do you want written on your gravestone? I said, the thing I would probably want, he was a lot like Coach Smith. And I don't think I was. I that would be embarrassing to say. There are a lot of moments in my life when he was alive and when now that he's passed that I know I'm disappointing him a little bit in how poorly I handled situations or relationships. But in the same sense, he was one of my best friends. He was one of my best mentors. He was one of my, he was the one guy that could tell me, Coach George, you're doing it the wrong way here. He could stand me up in a very, very, very honest way. And as I said, it's by far the best decision I ever made. And thank God I went to North Carolina and not to Duke.
Would you say that you aimed to be like Dean in that regard, that you wanted to be almost a second father to your players?
I don't think pro basketball allows that as much as college basketball allows that. But I cannot deny that I wish pro basketball would allow the coach to be closer to the player. That early in my career, it was more available in the 80s and 90s. Today's game, players have their friends. They have their PR director. They have their, they're now celebrities. And they're building their own brand off the court. But early in the 80s and 90s, there was more connection with players. I mean, Nate McMillan and Sam Perkins and Detlef Schrempf in Seattle are really close people. Even when I go back to Philadelphia with World Be Free, and he and I had battles in Cleveland. But, Gary Payton and Sean Kemp, we're all still trying to bring a new team back to Seattle because we all want to get back together and embellish stories and tell stories about how much fun it was. And we all feel that Seattle deserves an NBA basketball team.
I thought you were going to go that direction between college and pro. Is it the money and the fame that just changes the dynamic?
Mike, I'm going to tell you, I think money might kill the game. I think the game of basketball has gotten so big right now. We have Ben Simmons right now who signed a $190 million contract. And he played 1 year of it, and now he says, I'm not playing. That's hard for me as a human being, to respect. That someone's giving you $200 million to play basketball, and now you're going to slam the door because, you feel that they treated you poorly. And it's just, we got too much, I don't know what the word is, too much judgment and politics and interpretation into basketball. And the bigger the money gets, we all get wealthier, but I'm not sure the game gets better.
Was there a divide, a line you couldn't cross as a coach in the NBA in terms of building relationships with your players?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to be straightforward.
Good, because this is called Truth Plus Tribe.
Yeah, when all the race stuff happened with George Floyd,
yes,
I went back to a lot of my players, ex-players and coaches, black players, and I asked them a lot of questions about, what I could have done better. And I've always thought I was a good leader, but I think in the black-white situation, I could have been a hell of a lot more open-minded and aware of what my black players were going through. And then I started reading the books on white supremacy and white bias and all that stuff. And I have that in my personality. It is in my upbringing. And I wish that door that happened with George Floyd woke me to that I got to change. I was wrong in a lot of the ways I acted and just my behavior, my daily behaviors. That was offensive to the African-American player. And I just wasn't that aware of how tough their lives were. I went to, I would say, 25 or 30 guys. And every one of those guys told me a story of police, whatever, brutality or poor police behavior. Every one, not one. There's not one guy that didn't have an ugly story or two or three. My son-in-law is black. And the stories he tells me about make me cry. And I knew that they came from a different part of, how they grew up. It had to be different than me, but I wasn't smart enough to be aware of it.
Let me bring up a subject that I don't think is difficult for you whatsoever, but I guarantee you a lot of business leaders are dealing with this. And you talked about how wildly talented people have more options or sometimes feel they have more say. And when I ask this question, I'm thinking of the Ray Allens and the Carmelo Anthonys of the world that just never seem to get on board with the leader's direction, namely the coach. And in essence, having heard some of your previous conversations, weren't always the best team players. How do you deal with that as a leader?
You mentioned a couple guys that I think I managed fairly well, but didn't get to the excellence that we probably both wanted to get to. The guy I would bring up that I think when I went through a lot of hell with, and now we're best friends, is Gary Payton. I came to Seattle when Gary Payton and Nate McMillan were my point guards. And I'll be honest with you, there were days when I first got there that Nate McMillan I thought was a better point guard than Gary Payton. And so trying to figure out all that took almost 3 years before we got into a good place. But it all came down to communication and connection. I got to know his mom. I got to know his father. I got to know Gary's temper. And in a lot of ways, Gary is a lot like me. He's a competitive asshole. He wants to win and he'll do anything to win. And at times, he's going to do things that might be stupid. And I've done stupid things in my life that I wish I wouldn't have done, but I was doing out of being a competitor and thinking that I was doing it the way I thought would be best to be successful. But I think all talented people, the only way you can connect with them is communicate with them. And keep judgment out the window. Don't bring judgment in. Just listen. Listen with curiosity. Learn and understand that they might be seeing the same thing you're seeing, but their interpretation is quite different than you are. And through the years, I've learned that we all don't see the same thing, even though we're looking at one thing. And if we don't have an openness to someone else's opinion and a curiosity to come together and unify rather than to push apart, then you're done. And don't get me wrong, there are relationships that you have to say, we're done. And sometimes it's done too early, but most of the time it's usually done too late. I know Belichick really believes that making a tough decision early is one of his strengths. One of the reasons they've won championships is they have not dug a hole in their organization trying to solve a problem when they knew the problem wasn't solvable. And there's actually a George Patton quote that I use quite frequently in preparation. The preparation of trying to figure out the best plan that takes a lot of time rather than taking a good plan aggressively executed. I'm a believer the good plan is aggressively executed and not trying to be the smartest guy in the world or the smartest guy in the room coming out with the best plan. Because I've coached 1,999 basketball games. And of those 1,999 basketball games, there might be 100 that I felt the game plan worked at the beginning, and I didn't have to do much to as the game went on. But 1,899 of them, you had to be adaptable. You had to have the ability to change in the middle of a game, and also to feel the pulse of the team and allow them to have the freedom to be creative and successful.
So, Coach, a lot of what I got was you talked about communication. You got to find a way to communicate with those people that the relationship is rough, regardless of their level of talent. You got to find a way to communicate that they understand, they feel heard, and better build that relationship.
As soon as you start compromising the truth and not commit to the truth, you're not going to be a champion. You'll have success, you'll win games, but you must be committed if you want to be a champion in the NBA. And that commitment's got to be from the coach to the best player, to the worst player, to the equipment manager, to the masseuse, to the whole organization has got to have a commitment.
I think what you measure is very much who you are. It determines your behaviors. And if it's points on the board, that's going to be a very individualistic approach. I always found more success in my teammates. When my teammates are successful, that's where I found success. That's what truly brought a smile to my face. There was never a better feeling than watching one of my teammates, get awarded for what they did in combat. I felt such an overwhelming sense of pride not receiving it myself. And when you can find that pride in other people's accomplishments that you call teammates, that's when I think you start to foster a culture that eventually will be untouchable.
Well, I love being on a team. I mean, that's my whole thing is, with truth and tribe and truth in basketball, is we're kind of building a team of guys that want to tell the truth, and somehow, some way have a impact, a value of sharing stories and information and thoughts that can help somebody along the way. We live in the crazy times, but in the same sense, we probably live in the best of times, and we can choose to be negative, or we can choose to be positive and evolving, knowing that if we do some things the right way, it'll be better, and it'll grow. And I think commitment, though, and compromise is something that I've learned. A lot of people think compromise is a good word. I think it's a losing word.
I will say I definitely agree with you wholeheartedly on sometimes certain relationships aren't going to work out, and you got to make that decision early on. And it's not that two people couldn't work together. Sometimes it's the environmentals, it's the culture, it's timing. There's just a lot of factors that play into that. And I know there's a lot of people where we've had to sever that relationship. Had it been 5 years earlier, different circumstances, we would have been great teammates. When you said that, and I know you brought up Belichick, it brought up a guy named Bill Campbell. Bill Campbell was also from Pennsylvania, and was a football coach in the NCAA, and then broke into Kodak and eventually Apple and was the CEO of Intuit. He was known as the secret coach of Silicon Valley. And the point I'm trying to make here for a lot of leaders listening is that sometimes you just got to pull that trigger and let somebody go. And I asked him a question at one point because I was having a difficult situation with what in the military you would consider my right-hand man. They were supposed to be my right-hand man. And we weren't getting along. And when I asked him, hey, when do you know, or how do you identify what's the right time to fire somebody? And I think you'll like this. He said, 2 years earlier rather than 2 years late. And you'll never know if you made the right decision. However, at least you won't suffer the impacts of a toxic culture.
I agree with that 100%.
So I think you'll like this one. The founder of Delta Force, which is probably the premier counterterrorism unit in the world, he was a Vietnam veteran, very disruptive thinker. But when asked about teams, specifically referring to Vietnam, he said, I'd rather go down the river with 7 studs than 100 shitheads. Referring to, he'd rather go down with 7 highly trained individuals who can work as one cohesive unit than just 100 hired guns.
I want to jump on that because that's what I think our American military should be. It should be the best fighting force in the world, and it doesn't have to be the biggest. In my opinion, the wastefulness and again, just an amateur, and I know nothing about the facts and the realities that you have lived your life through, but I just think we can do it better than we do it right now. And I know that we have the best. I know, the Navy SEALs are this, and the Air Force probably has this, and NASA has this. And, I know that that we live in a safe place because of our military. But I just think we need to polish it up. And to me, I don't necessarily think it's the military as much as it's the leadership of the military and the civilian leadership of the military. It's not about just throwing trillions of dollars your way. Let's have a plan. Let's have a belief on what we want to be, not only now, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and maybe even 30 years from now. Have a plan of sustaining, about being the best protector of the world in a way that we protect America first, but also we're a good policeman for the rest of the world.
That is a vast subject. And I will boil it down to this. The military was amazing. Is there waste? Absolutely. Right. The reason there's waste let me rephrase it this way. If the military has a weakness, it's the government in incentivizing the wrong things. And the two are inextricably tied. You can't, unbuckle them from one another. But, working for guys like Dave Cooper and Admiral McCraven, I mean, these guys are great, phenomenal leaders, sometimes their hands tied behind their back or constrained by government regulation that just has no logic to it whatsoever. But it's a much more vast subject. In fact, who we should get on the show is a guy named Tom Ricks, who wrote the book The Generals. And he talked about how the transformation of the generals from World War II, where they policed their own, other generals fired other generals at a much higher rate than today, where civilian leadership pretty much controls who stays and who goes. But I'll get you that book. You have to read it. I think you'll find it very The Generals by Tom Ricks, and I may be screwing up his name. Let me ask you one thing, and then I want to get to one final question. I'm a believer that there is no one leadership style. There's one. However, when I was younger, I had one leadership style. And true leaders, the very best I've seen, had multiple styles. And you talk specifically, you use two forms of leadership, the dictator and the delegator. And you said you became a better delegator as you got older, as you got wiser. Is there a time for all the leaders listening into this, running their businesses or running their organizations, there is a time to be a dictator? I'm assuming you're going to agree with that.
Yes.
When is that time?
I think when everybody in the building wants you to be a dictator, when the responsibility of the decision is no one has the answer, you got to come up with the answer and then figure a way out to get everybody to stand behind that answer. And that happens in a basketball season a half a dozen times. Maybe a bad team, it might happen 10 times. A good team, it might happen 5 or 6 times. But there are always going to be circumstances that create a little bit of conflict and chaos that can send the team the wrong way or can motivate the team and inspire the team to go the right way. And I think leadership today is you got to have more of an openness to listen to other people's opinion, because people don't want to be told to shut up and just do it. They want a reason for why they're doing things. And in common sense says they have a little bit of a right to know why you want me to do something. So I think today's leaders got to be, not only smarter, but I think they got to be more compassionate about what is going on around them. And then when success happens, share it. Share the success. Don't become an egotistical leader and take the success onto you. My mom and dad always gave me this phrase: the more you give, the more you get. And I think that's a good part of leadership. I think the other thing about part of the leadership that I just going off the framework of my mind right now is stay away from negative people. Stay away from negative energy in your organization, especially in your leadership group that you're trying to umbrella. I don't know if you have 1,000 people working for you, but in today's world, our crazy world of information, there's overflow of positive and there's overflow of negative. And I'm just going to tell you, I don't like negative energy, and I don't like it on my team. I don't like it in my organization. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like it amongst my friends.
It wastes time. Negativity just wastes time. And I'm not going to say I was never the negative person. There was a lot of times I was the negative person. As you say, you're not going to allow it in your life. Everyone needs to understand that. You have the right to choose who you hang out with.
Exactly.
But I think when you're in trying times, people like to look for people that are negative because misery loves company.
No question. I mean, I always looked at an NBA basketball game, and the guys that are pissed off at you, and you go out and watch warm-ups, the guys that are pissed off at you, or their guys have a couple guys pissed off at their coach, and they gravitate to each other.
No kidding.
I think there's a power to energy. I mean, both positive energy has a power, and negative energy has a power. And like I'm an amateur basketball coach looking at football right now. I don't think the Green Bay Packers have a chance in hell of being any good because they have too much negative energy. I don't care how good he is. He can't overcome negative energy. He cannot do it. It doesn't work.
That is a unfortunate culture right now, and that's coming from a San Francisco 49ers fan through and through. So I can't say I'm totally unhappy to see that.
Aaron Rodgers, I loved him watch play.
Mm-hmm.
He was fantastic last night. But there's ego and negative energy and conflict and compromise all over the place. All the words that I don't like in leadership. Right now, the Green Bay Packers have them right on their table almost every day.
You said earlier you don't like the word compromise. What is it about compromise that you think is not a great leadership tenet?
Don't get me wrong. Unfortunately, I think we all have moments that you have to compromise. And I'm not saying, I think the big moments it's difficult for me to give in to compromise. But the little things, about missing a practice or, our star player wants to, there's a little bit of a hypocrisy to some of our decisions in leadership. But to win an NBA championship is commitment. Yeah, you can have a good season having compromise. You can win, 50 games. And at the end of the season, you can figure it out. But if you're good enough to win a championship, if you have enough talent to have a great year, I don't think compromise is a part of that because I think I'm giving up something and you're giving up something. And in the end, it'll come back to haunt us somehow, some way.
So you're trying to achieve some level of universal commitment across the entire organization.
Open universal commitment where when we argue about it, we might argue about it for 5 days. And then when we come to the decision, this is who we are, this is what we want to be, we walk out the room unified. Does that happen all the time? I think if you hire the right people that want to be champions and want to be the best, yes, it can work out that way.
Now I understand. I better understand why compromise. Yes, if you make a compromise for your best player who wants to skip a practice, what message does that send to the rest of the organization?
And compromise creates hypocrisy.
Yes, love it. Back on positivity, and my final question here, Coach, which this is not the last episode we'll do together. Where are we going with Truth Plus Media? What's going to make us different? Because I know you want the positive message out there. I know you want to do it in a civil way that we ensure we're listening to people's perspectives. What is going to make us different?
Well, Michael, I don't know how you feel, but today's world has so much unbelievably powerful information on human performance. The impossible is being done now on a weekly basis somewhere in the world. I mean, flying cars. Remember that I watched the Jetsons. We're going to have flying cars in the next 5 to 10 years. 800-mile-an-hour trains. We're going to be living on Venus. Things that we never thought ever could happen. It's because smart human beings are getting together and collaborating and sharing information and are doing powerful, impossible things. Sports world is the same way. Things that we never thought we could do before, we are doing. I mean, we have guys flying with wings. I'm sure you have military stories that are unbelievable what is capable of doing. My brother-in-law, told me that they can shoot a missile from 2,000 miles away and hit a house and hit the chimney of that house. How in the hell can they do that? Tell me. But if they can do that, there's so much more we can do. And then if we want to go into medicine and we want to go into the genetics of our world today, in the next 30 years, there's going to be unbelievably great things happen because people now think they can do human performance at a higher level. And you know something, Michael? We can. We can. And young kids today are kind of realizing that they can. I mean, we used to think about just getting a college degree was, guys now are thinking about doing unbelievable, impossible things at age 16 and 17. How about, in tennis, all the young players? Before in football, the quarterbacks were always 30-year-old guys. Now, most of the guys in the NFL are under 25 because they're learning more and they're getting better faster, and it's only going to continue. And in the end, human performance, everyday warrior mentality is, I think, a part of everyday warrior mentality for me, and I think for you, is get better, get smarter, learn, listen, change.
The pace at which this younger generation is accelerating is scary. And if we can, in some way, help them accelerate their human performance, but not at the cost of their balance, I think we will have hit a home run.
I think I wish I would have learned meditation early in the life. I mean, now I know that my best mind is a quiet mind, a calm mind. It's not a chaotic mind. So I think for the young kids out there, all these distractions that we have in our life, whatever you want, social media, your telephone, your mind works better when it's calm and still and relaxed. And that's when you get in the flow. It's not when you got 1,000 things going on and thinking that you're really important because you have 17 messages you got to return. Slow down, find time for yourself, find time to believe in yourself, and then go out and hit some home runs.
Absolutely. Words of wisdom. Well, Coach, I know we'll take this one podcast at a time. And if we can do that well and execute well, I think we'll impact a lot of lives. Coach, I consider this the equivalent of performance management. You've basically taken the time to coach and mentor me, which a lot of leaders don't do and is necessary to improve anyone. Again, I highly respect you for what you've accomplished. The fact that you still consider yourself a student of leadership is admirable, regardless of all the accolades that you've racked up.
Well, Michael, I'm learning from you, and I want you to be, one of my favorite theories in life is when you're in the wilderness and you're out there for the first time and you're trying to figure, am I doing, what should I do? And you're a little confused. My belief is, someone told me this a long time ago, be bold. Be bold, man. Be bold.
Dare greatly. Dare greatly. Well, Coach, again, I appreciate you being here, taking the time. My
pleasure, Michael.
I can't wait till the next check-in with Coach for season 2. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us again. Hopefully you took 1 to 3 things away from this that helps you improve as a human, as a leader, as a father, husband, wife, mother. It doesn't matter. This applies to everything. Again, thanks for joining us. And this is Truth and Tribe.